The final 24 hours of Gordon Northcott, the haunting death of a child predator. Hi everyone. Fog hung low over San Quentin Prison on the morning of October 2nd, 1930, as if the sky itself was reluctant to witness what was about to unfold. Behind the cold stone walls, a young man waited silent, restless, and hollowed out by the weight of his own legacy. His name was Gordon Stewart Northcott, and just a few years earlier, his chicken ranch in the rural town of Wineville had become the setting of one of California's most horrifying crime stories. Luring young boys under the guise of offering work, Northcott became the central figure in a case so disturbing. It shattered the nation and left families broken for generations. Now, after failed appeals and chilling half-confessions, the so-called monster of the chicken coop faced the rope. But in his final hours, what he revealed and what he refused paints a picture even more unsettling than the crimes themselves. This is how Gordon Northcott spent his last 24 hours. Dear friends, October 1st, 1930, dawned like any other fog-draped morning along San Francisco Bay. But inside San Quentin State Prison, it was a different kind of cold one, not born of weather, but of judgment. Gordon Stewart Northcott, the man behind the infamous Wineville Chicken Coop Murders, was living his final hours, his breath paced with dread, his nerves fraying by the minute. The routine of death row had turned into a countdown. The clock was ticking. Northcott had not eaten. His breakfast tray, oatmeal, toast, black coffee sat untouched outside his cell door. The guards took note. In their logs, they described him as restless, pacing, distracted. His movements were erratic, almost rehearsed, as if he hoped that walking fast enough might take him away from what waited just outside his door, the gallows. He had arrived in Los Angeles in the early 1920s from Canada, bringing with him charm and arrogance. By 1924, he persuaded his father to buy land in a dusty patch of Riverside County, where he established a chicken ranch in Wineville. But behind the clucking of hens and fences built to keep animals in, he constructed a nightmare. Under the pretense of offering jobs and shelter, Northcott lured young boys to his ranch. Once there, they never left. Between 1926 and 1928, he kidnapped, assaulted, and killed at least 4 boys, though many believe the number was much higher. The known victims included Walter Collins, whose disappearance rocked Los Angeles, Louise and Nelson Winslow, 2 young brothers who vanished after a church picnic, and an unidentified Mexican boy whose bones were later found on the ranch. The crimes, discovered in part due to the persistence of Walter's mother, Christine Collins, horrified the nation. Even seasoned detectives reportedly struggled to stomach what they found. At San Quentin, Northcott had spent months cycling through appeals and denials and despair. That October morning, Warden James Holohan made his usual rounds and stopped at Northcott's cell. The man he saw was no longer the smug manipulator who once taunted lawmen in court. The warden's notes described him as nervous, eyes darting, hands trembling slightly. But he remained defiant, denying the crimes that had earned him the noose. Lunch came beef stew, bread, and a single apple. Northcott picked at the bread, left the rest. For hours afterward, he hummed tuneless fragments of old songs quietly, but continuously. Prison staff said it was unsettling, a low broken melody that filled the corridor like a whisper of madness. The chaplain offered to sit with him. Northcott declined. "I don't need saving," he said. That afternoon, his lawyers came one last time. Their meeting was brief. Northcott barely spoke, only nodded occasionally. One of them later remarked, it was as if he still didn't believe it would happen. The bravado was gone, as was the arrogance. The man who once boasted of killing dozens now looked like someone shrinking under the weight of his own undoing. By early evening, the sun fell behind the prison walls, and Northcott's cell dimmed in shadow. He sat on his cot flipping through a Bible but barely reading more than a word or two. Guards overheard him muttering, "I don't want to die," over and over again, each repetition softer than the last. That night, a letter arrived for the warden. It was from Sarah Louise Northcott, Gordon's mother, who was herself imprisoned at the California Institution for Women in Tehachapi. She had been convicted for her role in Walter Collins' death. Some believed she had taken the fall for her son. Others were convinced she was a participant. Her letter read, "Please spare my boy. If not, send for me and end me too, so I may be with him." It was an emotional plea, but too late to matter. As the prison lights dimmed, something inside Northcott began to crack. Guards reported hearing him laugh and talk to someone who wasn't there. He refused water, refused visitors, refused rest. And when Reverend Nent came later that night, he found Northcott staring at the ceiling, silent, unmoving. His eyes were open. The Reverend would write later, but there was no recognition, no life. At some point, Northcott requested pencil and paper. For 20 minutes, he scribbled furiously. Then, just as suddenly, he tore the paper to shreds and flushed them down the cell toilet. Whatever he wrote, confessions, denials, or the unraveling words of a fractured mind, was lost forever. By morning, October 2nd, Northcott hadn't slept a wink. He refused breakfast again, scrambled eggs, oatmeal, and black coffee. Soon after, he was weighed for the final time. The noose, prepared months in advance, was tested once more for length and resistance. Officials wanted no mistakes. "We want this over quickly," one said. No headlines. Reverend Nent returned and spent an hour with Northcott. Their conversation was slow, punctuated by long silences. In his final moments, Northcott repeated what he'd said for years. "I am innocent. I am innocent. The police made me say things. God above is my judge." There was no confession, no apology. Witnesses, journalists, lawmen, and prison officials gathered in the execution yard. California law required their presence. They signed affidavits affirming they had seen the condemned man's final moments. Northcott buttoned his prison shirt with trembling fingers. He asked for a blindfold. The guards obliged. His last request was simple. He didn't want to see the gallows. At the door to his cell, he paused. The silence around him was suffocating. They led him through the yard, blindfolded, hands trembling. At the base of the wooden structure grimly called the Old Slash and Blind. Northcott hesitated. Some said he whispered, "Oh God, please don't." Others claimed he stumbled. Whether from fear or disorientation, no one could be sure. The executioner asked if he had any last words. "A prayer for me," he whispered. The hood was lowered. The rope was secured. The trap door opened. With a violent snap, it was over. At 10:05. Gordon Stewart Northcott was declared dead by hanging. The same system he once mocked with his confident smirk had the last word. A crime that shocked the country had come to its final page, not with a scream, not with a confession, but with silence and a rope. And the question that still echoes nearly a century later, was Northcott a madman, a cold-blooded killer, or something darker, something we still don't have a word for? His crimes faded into history, but the pain remained for those left behind. The truth, as always, rests in shadows. In the end, Gordon Stewart Northcott walked a path carved by cruelty, denial, and isolation. His final hours were marked not by remorse, but by quiet terror, the silence of a man who had run out of places to hide, refusing his last meals, rejecting spiritual comfort, and shredding his final written words. He left behind no clear answers, only echoes of horror and unanswered questions. The gallows didn't just end a life, they closed a chapter so dark, it reshaped how California saw evil itself. Was he insane depraved, or simply a man who believed he could outwit consequence? The truth likely died with him at 10:05 that foggy October morning. Yet the victims' names, Walter Collins, the Winslow brothers, and so many unnamed remain etched in time, refusing to be forgotten. Justice was served, but closure, that remains elusive. Thank you for watching, and remember, the past doesn't stay buried forever.